Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good people. My name is Martin Murage, and today I'm coming to read to you another few chapters from Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. And today I'll be reading chapter 22, 23, and 24. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get inspired to check out the other videos that I've done, the other chapters, and maybe even to get the book and check out Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince, because I bet you'll get more information when you read it for yourself. And please subscribe if you haven't subscribed to my channel. Chapter 22 is called A Ruler's Ministers. A ruler's choice of ministers is an important matter. The quality of ministers will reflect his good sense or lack of it, and give people their first impression of the way the ruler's mind is working. If his ministers are capable and loyal, people will always reckon a ruler astute because he was able to recognize their ability and command their loyalty. When they are not, people will always have a reason to criticize because the first mistake the ruler made was in his choice of ministers. Everyone who knew Antonio da Venafro, Pandolfo Petrucci's minister in Siena, thought Pandolfo extremely smart for having chosen him. There are actually three kinds of mind. One kind grasps things unaided. The second sees what another has grasped. And the third grasps nothing and sees nothing. The first kind is extremely valuable. The second, valuable. The third, useless. So although Pandolfo didn't have the first kind of mind, he certainly had the second. If someone is sharp enough to recognize what's right and wrong in what another man says and does, then even if he doesn't have the creativity to make policy himself, he can still see which of his ministers' policies are positive and negative, encourage the good ones and correct the bad ones. The minister, meanwhile, will realize that he can't fool the ruler and so will have to behave. There is no infallible way of checking a minister's credentials. When you see the man thinking of more for himself than for you, when his policies are all designed to enhance his own interests, then he'll never make a good minister, and you'll never be able to trust him. A minister running a state must never think of himself, only of the ruler, and should concentrate exclusively on the ruler's business. To make sure he does so, the ruler, for his part, must take an interest in the minister, grant him wealth and respect, oblige him, and share honors and appointments with him. The way the minister will see that he can't survive, that way, the minister will see that he can't survive without the ruler. He'll have so many honors, he won't want any more. So much wealth, he won't look for more. And so many appointments that he'll guard against any change of the status quo. When rulers and their ministers arrange their relationships this way, they can trust each other. When they don't, one or the other is bound to come to a bad end. Chapter 23, Avoiding Flatterers. There's another important issue we need to discuss. A mistake rulers can only avoid if they are very canny or very good at choosing their ministers. I am talking about flatterers. Courts are always full of them, and men are so ready to congratulate themselves on their achievements and to imagine themselves more successful than they are, that it is hard not to fall into this error. Then, if you do try to defend yourself from flatterers, you run the risk of having people despise you. Because the only way to guard yourself against flattery is to have people understand that you don't mind them telling you the truth. But when anyone and everyone can tell you the truth, you lose respect. So the sensible ruler must find a middle way, choosing intelligent men for ministers and giving them and only them the right to tell the truth, and only on the issues he asks about, not in general. However, the ruler should ask his ministers about everything and listen to their opinions, then make up his mind on his own, following his criteria. In responding to these advisors, as a group or separately, he should make it clear that the more openly they speak, the more welcome their advice will be. After which, he shouldn't take advice from anyone else, but get on whatever has been decided and be firm in his decisions. Try a different approach, and you'll either be ruined by flatterers or change your mind so often, listening to everyone's opinions, that people will lose their respect for you. Let me offer an example from modern times. Bishop Luca Reinaldi, a man close to the present emperor Maximilian, said that the emperor never took advice from anyone and never got his policies enacted. This is because he did the opposite of what I proposed above. Being secretive, the emperor tends not to explain his plans to anyone and doesn't seek advice. When he starts putting his policies into action and people see what he's up to, his ministers tell him he's got it wrong, and all too readily he changes his mind. As a result, whatever he does one day, he undoes the next, and nobody understands what he wants or means to do, and no one can make plans in response to his policies. So, a ruler must always take advice, but only when he wants it, not when others want to give it to him. In fact, he should discourage people from giving him advice unasked. On the other hand, he should ask a great deal and listen patiently when an advisor responds truthfully. And if he realizes someone is keeping quiet out of fear, he should show his irritation. Many people think that when a ruler has a reputation for being sensible, it's thanks to the good advice he's getting from his ministers and not because he's shrewd himself. But they're wrong. There's a general and an infallible rule here, that a leader who is insensible himself can never get good advice, unless he just happens to put the government entirely in the hands of a single minister who turns out to be extremely shrewd. In this case, he may well get good advice, but the situation won't last long because the minister will soon grab the state for himself. If, on the other hand, he's taking advice from more than one person, an ingenious ruler will find himself listening to very different opinions and won't know how to make sense of them. Each of his advisors will be thinking of his own interests, and the ruler won't be able to control them or even sense what's going on. It's not a case of finding better ministers. Men will always be out to trick you unless you force them to be honest. In conclusion, a ruler isn't smart because he's getting proper advice. On the contrary, it is good sense that makes the right advice possible. Chapter 24. Why Italian rulers have lost their states. Followed carefully, the guidelines I've laid down will allow a ruler who's just taken over a state to assume the aura of a hereditary king and give him greater security and staying power than if his government was well established. People watch what a new ruler does far more attentively than they do a hereditary one. And if his achievements are impressive, they'll have a greater hold on people and command greater loyalty than an old royal bloodline. Men are more interested in the present than the past, and when things are going well, they'll be happy and won't look elsewhere. On the contrary, they'll do everything they can to defend a ruler so long as he doesn't let himself down in other ways. So he'll enjoy the double glory of having both founded a new kingdom and graced and consolidated it with good laws, a good army, good allies, and good policies. Conversely, the man who's born to power but behaves so stupidly as to lose it is shamed twice over. Turning now to those Italian rulers who've lost power in recent years, the King of Naples, for example, and the Duke of Milan, and others too. The first thing we find is that they all had poor armies. This for the reason I discussed at length above. Then we see that some of them had the people against them, or they did have the people's support. They couldn't keep the nobles on their side. Without these failings, you don't lose a state that's strong enough to field an army. Philip of Macedonia, not Alexander's father, but the Philip beaten by Titus Quintius, had nothing like the resources of the Romans and the Greeks who attacked him. All the same, being a military man and a leader who knew how to please the people and keep the nobles on his side, he held out for many years, and though in the end he did lose control of a few towns, at least he hung on to his kingdom. So these rulers of ours, who were well-established kings and dukes yet lost their states, should spare us their bad luck stories. They have only themselves to blame. In peacetime, they never imagined anything could change. It's a common shortcoming not to prepare for the storm while the weather is fair. And when trouble struck, their first thought was to run for it rather than defend themselves. They hoped the people would be incensed by the barbarity of the invaders and call them back. This isn't a bad policy when you have no alternative, but to trust in that reaction when you could have taken other precautions is a serious failing. A ruler should never be resigned to falling from power because he's counting on finding someone to prop him again afterwards. Maybe people won't oblige, and if they do, you won't be safe because your strategy was spineless and involved relying on others. The only good, sure, lasting forms of defense are those based on yourself and your own strength. That is chapter 24. And join me tomorrow where I'll read the last two chapters, 25 and 26. And I'll be done with this book. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And I'll see you next time. Adios.